We are also now being joined by Principal Diplomatic Correspondent Siddharth Sibal, who is right now in Tel Aviv. Siddharth, what is the on-ground situation like?
Well, one thing I can tell you that the WION team has been almost here on the ground for now 2 to 3 hours, and it has been a ghost city. It has been a ghost airport. When we landed at the airport, we were among the very few foreign nationals at the airport. A lot of Israelis we saw coming back to the country to, of course, support their families and, of course, support their country. But essentially, there is a sense of tension in the air and a sense of worry. Well, today is our first day, and many people who we have spoken to have warned us not to go to a southern part of the country given the situation there. But essentially, we have seen reportage from that part of the country, and it looks like as the build-up continues by the Israeli side, there is, of course, an imminent siege of Gaza expected as well. But all in all, when it comes to the anger here, there is palpable sense of anger on the street as to what happened almost a week ago. A week ago here in Israel, we saw many people being killed, and this is something that Israel is highly unlikely to forget ever, and there will be lessons learned.
Right, Siddharth, Netanyahu has vowed that Israel will win this war, and he has asked 1.1 million Gazans. He's given them rather 6-hour window to travel towards South Gaza. What are you hearing on the expected Israeli ground offensive?
Well, it looks like a matter of time that there will be a ground offensive launched by the Israeli side, and this was something that was coming. In fact, many of the reportage we have seen from the ground is that there has been a major build-up, and also the cities in the south like Zedrot and others have been evacuated as well. These cities have essentially become a ghost town. Today, of course, is Shabbat, so of course a lot of people are at their home. But essentially, there is a worry as to when the next rocket hits. Of course, we know that there is the Iron Dome, which is working, including here in Tel Aviv. But all in all, a lot of worries. But there is anger on the street, and this is something that the Prime Minister, the Israeli Prime Minister, is expected to channel in many senses by, of course, launching that ground offensive in Gaza.
Yes, Professor Uriel, coming back to you, the same question I want to ask you, that is Israel has announced a 6-hour window for Gazans fleeing south. What happens if they're not able to displace themselves in the time frame given?
That's a fine question, and I have no good answer to that. That will be a call that should be made, obviously, not just by the IDF, but by political leaders. There is a sort of a new unity and crisis government in place. They should be making a very hard decision. Do they want to carry out the attack or to give more time, hours, maybe a day or two, for the people in Gaza to evacuate to the south? It's going to be a hard decision. I think, personally, I believe that the primary consideration should be humanitarian. We should aim to cause injury and kill as fewer as civilians as possible.
Thank you, Professor Uriel, for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Right. Siddharth, coming back to you, is there any update on the plans to retrieve the hostages taken by Hamas?
Well, the place where I am standing, just a few minutes away from this very place, the family members of the hostages are now protesting, calling on the government to make sure that there is an early release. And this is something that we have seen in other major capitals as well, including, of course, in France and in the US, where, of course, the family members of the hostages have been asking their governments to take a strong action to make sure that these hostages are released as soon as possible. But remember, today is 1 week since that terrible tragedy took place, and hopes fade almost every hour now. We know that there have been raids by the Israeli sides in Gaza, and there have been reports, certain reports on the situation the hostages, but unlikely in terms of how the hopes, of course, are fading and how it is translated on the ground. But all in all, when it comes to the hostages situation, that is something that is the biggest priority in front of the Israeli government, the release of these hostages. And as the Israeli ambassador in Delhi said that when it comes to Israeli actions, he reminded that what happened in Munich, where the Israeli athletes were killed, similar action will be taken by the Israeli government if the hostages are not released.
Yes, Siddhant, the question of the release of hostages, it remains extremely paramount and critical at the moment as the war enters day 8. But also talk to us about how there's another set of demonstrations going on in Tel Aviv against the Israeli leadership on the intel failure in being able to see such a huge attack which took place last weekend.
Well, of course, that was the big question on the mind of everyone from day one. It's a major intelligence failure. But, of course, the government is showing a brave face and has, of course, made a unity government as well. But remember, Netanyahu has been facing not a very bright political future. We saw a lot of protests in Israel over judicial reform. And now this development has happened. Now, Netanyahu, of course, will be making sure that there is strong action, which, of course, helps politically as well, but there is a need to accountability, and that is what the people of Israel have been asking. But as of now, the focus of the people and of the government is to make sure that war ends and there is some kind of solution, and of course the hostages are released, and after then there is and there will be time of accountability, something that the people of Israel are seeking very closely and urgently.
Yes, Siddhant. Thanks very much for joining us. That was the Principal Diplomatic Correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Please stay safe, Siddhant.